And I wanted to welcome folks to the seventh middle grades conversation of the 2025-2026 school year. This work is sponsored by the Middle Grades Collaborative, and each month we have a conversation with practitioners and educators discussing middle level education. For this afternoon, we're going to touch base on the work that folks have done since the Middle Grades Institute. We're also going to talk about what practitioners are experiencing in their learning communities right now, and how that might build out to professional development across the summer and maybe goals for next year. Our first order of business is to just have everybody introduce themselves. Again, my name is Don Taylor. This is Middle Grades Conversations. I teach sustainability to grades 5 through 8 at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier. I'm going to hand it off to Kyle. And Kyle, when you're finished introducing yourself, if you could pick the next person, that would be great. And again, thank you everybody for spending the time with us this afternoon.
Thanks, Don. Kyle Chadburn, I'm the Access and Opportunities Coordinator for the Orleans Central Supervisory Union, and I will pass off to Meg.
Hi, folks. My name is Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities to 7th and 8th graders at Shelburne Community School, and I'm going to pass it off to Andrea.
I'm Andrea Grattan. I teach 7th and 8th grade social studies at Brownington Central School. And I think our duo is next.
I'm Sharon Fitzgerald. I'm an academic support team member at St. John's Berry School.
And I'm Brenda Kendall. I'm a humanities teacher for 8th grade this year, 7th grade next year, because we loop with the kids at St. John's Berry School.
James?
Yes.
James.
Yes.
Not Jim.
I'm James Nagel, and I'm a professor at St. Michael's College, and I'm here to join the conversation.
So before we hear from Brenda and Sharon about the work they've done since the Institute, and from other folks who will be joining us in just a little bit, we wanted to ask the practitioners, what are you teaching right now that you're excited about, and how are you teaching it? And I'll start with Meg, and then Meg, you can hand it off to your choice of participants.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. We're currently in our standardized testing, our VTCAP testing, but the unit I'm simultaneously starting is our 20th century conflict unit, and I've run into quite a few questions from kids around, wait, are we at war? Did that count? What's happening in the Middle East? And so the way that we're going about it is getting some basic information about the cause and effects of 20th century conflicts: World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Cold War. Some are doing Gulf War. Some have some other ones that they were interested in. And then the sort of second part of the unit is looking at current events and seeing what ties they can connect between historic conflicts and today. And then they'll put together some kind of a product, a podcast or an interview or an article, or we're going to do lots of discussion, like fishbowl discussions, to get them talking to one another and learning about conflicts that they aren't studying, but starting to see threads of things that are in common. And the big thing that we're working on is how to do research, like how to look for information without using AI. And so that's my challenge right now, is the AI comes right up with the answers. So we've been talking about how to do this using primary and secondary sources. So that is the focus right now. We're at the very beginning. A lot of I think there's some genuine enthusiasm, and they were really tired today when they had my class because they've been in testing all morning. So we'll see how the enthusiasm changes over time. Let's see. Andrew, you want to go next?
Yeah. I am doing with all of my classes, we're learning about Japanese internment right now. And hopefully that will be a way for us to start thinking about different perspectives. And we read an article to get some background knowledge. And then today, with all of my classes, we started reading George Takei's graphic novel about his time in an internment camp when he was a child. And the way that we're doing that is that I've divided the book into parts, and for each part, I've made a list of the characters that speak in that part, and then we divide them up as if they're their roles. And so students get to be one of those characters and read the dialogue for those characters. I have a student who is our sound interpreter. So anytime there's a sound in the graphic novel, they make that sound for us. And so it's almost like this performance. The book just like comes alive for them. And we are going to alternate reading that with PBS has a program called Mission US where they have different simulations from different time periods. And there's one about Japanese internment. So we're going to read a section of the book, and then students are going to do this simulation where they kind of take on that role as if they were in one of these camps and have to make decisions and kind of see the similarities between the book and the decisions they're going to have to make in that program. And I'll pass it off to the St. J team.
So I'm doing a lot of intervention right now, not really teaching any units, but this spring I'm going to be working with sixth grade on revamping their Humans of St. Johnsbury unit. It kind of is a spinoff of the Humans of New York. I don't know if you've heard of that, where the kids interview different people in the community and work on their communication skills. And we put together a book like the Humans of New York, where they have taken a picture. They have some have taken their notes and put that into some type of a piece of writing. They have choice of what kind to do. And it's kind of a nice way to end the year because it's really fun for them. We also read a lot of really beautiful picture books that have stories of not necessarily famous people they would know, but like I'm trying to think of one of them, a famous chef, and all about his life. And so it's kind of cool, and they think they enjoy that. They get to choose not only the community member, but the type of job or impact that person has had on the community as part of their voice and choice.
And in my classroom, I co-teach with the other humanities teacher. We've just within the last month decided that we like each other a lot and that we're just better together. So we've combined all of our kids into one room and we teach together. And so we have been building background knowledge. Well, first of all, we did the antebellum era and then enslavement. We talked about the Civil War, and then we did Reconstruction. We're currently in Reconstruction. As part of that unit, and in celebration of Black History Month, we had the kids create a Black History pop-up, Black History Museum pop-up. So they all chose a figure or an event that was of interest to them. And so we had 73 different events or people because they couldn't do the same thing. And then they created an artifact that was meant to be pretty engaging. And then we invited the lower school. Actually, we had grades 3 through 7, actually 3 through 8, come and visit the museum because we had the other classes that weren't involved in that particular room in 8th grade come and visit. So we had a lot of visitors come into the museum and look at the different artifacts, which was a really cool thing. And now we are transitioning to Jim Crow and various early activism of African Americans and civil rights. And then we will be looking at teens as change agents. And that is intentional so that they're kind of motivated to work on their capstone project, which is an 8th grade kind of summative experience for our 8th graders here.
Awesome. I hear all sorts of amazing activities going on. In my class, we're finishing up a fiber arts unit where our 5th graders have learned to knit. Our 6th graders have made wet felted wool from wool that we got from a farm up the road. And then our seventh and eighth graders are learning how to stitch, mend, and darn. And no pun intended, but that's woven into a fiber arts waste and fast fashion unit where we talk about the amount of waste that's coming out of the clothing industry, which if you start to study it, it's unbelievable. And we can also start talking about the economics of, I have all the kids, for example, pull off their shoes and see where their shoes are made, which, as you know, mostly are halfway around the world. And with what's happening in current events, that's going to be much more expensive now, just based on shipping and energy costs. So we're trying to tie what we're doing in class and with our handwork to larger current events, economic, environmental, and equity issues. And the kids get to learn how to use some skills that hopefully they'll start thinking about secondhand clothing or repairing their clothing so that it lasts longer rather than continuing to consume. And then that's leading us into sugaring season. And so we have our buckets up. We've had our first collection, and hopefully we'll get our kids up there collecting the sap and doing a boil so that they can see and understand the maple sugaring. And as all of you know, I think Tuesday was in the 70s. So we also take and look at climate and weather data and see how that's going to affect our landscape and our culture. Yeah, so that's what's going on. It's a busy time of year. Kyle or James, did you want to add any thoughts about what you're thinking about or what you're hearing from middle level students or teachers?
Well, I can go ahead. I have a Ed Studies senior seminar, and currently we're reading Harbor Me, which is a middle grades book, and it's about six individual middle schoolers. They're actually sixth graders, I think, and they're from different ethnicities. They're in a city school, and it's about them talking about themselves and their lives in a classroom where the teacher has left to leave them to their own devices, and we hear about their lives. And it's been great for the seminar because everyone in the seminar is at a middle or elementary school, and they're in one of many different internships, whether they're classroom teachers or specialists. And they get to really bring in what stories they're seeing at their particular school sites. So it's a nice conversation for newbies. So
I guess I'll speak from a different role since I'm not in the classroom right now. We just had our Vermont Association Middle Level Education Conference on Tuesday. So I'll speak as the executive director of that organization for a moment and just say that it was amazing to see. We had a little over 250 middle grade students come to the conference and present to each other. We take a lot of pride in the fact that we are one of the few conferences definitely in the state, if not beyond, that really emphasize student voice in professional level conference presentations. And so it's just really incredible to see all of these young people coming together and learning from each other and being inspired by each other. And we, this year, we're also able to spend some of our time during the conference soliciting feedback directly from students about what their needs are and how we as educators and professionals in their schools can help to put the right things in places to meet their needs here and now, and how we can continue to evolve our practices to match what those needs are. And so I've only started going through that feedback, that there's an abundance of it that we collected. But I'm really excited to be able to kind of synthesize all of that and then put it out to all of you folks, hopefully before the end of the year at one of these conversations, and be able to share that resource so that you can hear, because we had quite a few folks who are in this conversation right now brought students. And so I think it's really important that y'all get to hear what they had to say.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And Meredith Vaughn and Jess Sperling have joined us. Do you folks want to briefly introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Meredith Vaughn. We're both from Harwood Middle School in Duxbury. I teach 8th grade English this year and 7th next year.
I'm Jessica Sperling, and I teach 8th grade science this year and 7th next year.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hey,
Good.
good. How are you?
Good. You want to just briefly introduce yourselves? Whoa.
Yeah, you're disappearing.
Right.
Hi, Andrea and Kyle. I'm Sarah Ibsen. I teach social studies at Harwood.
And I'm Nick Gordon. I teach social studies as well.
All right. So thank you very much, Brenda, Sharon, Meredith, Jess, Nick, and Sarah for joining us. We were just talking about things that we're teaching right now, what we're excited about, and how we're teaching it. And so you are right on time. What we're going to do this afternoon is I'm just going to post in the chat. We just wanted to hear sort of long-term how your project or the project and goals that you set at the Institute. I think we checked in November. And we just want to hear how that's going, the progress or successes that you've experienced, maybe some challenges or areas of growth, and then how that work has changed your understanding of middle level practices. And so we're really here to hear from you. And so I think what we'll do is just pose that first question. We'll start with maybe Brenda. If you could just tell us briefly what your project or goals were coming out of the Institute, and then we'll go to Meredith and Jess, and then to Nick and Sarah. I know that some of you may have had a similar project, but you can just build off each other. Okay?
Sure.
All right. Brenda?
Yeah, so Sharon had to leave. We actually both have to go to the same meeting. We're like triple booked today. So thank you for letting us go first. So Sharon and another colleague, Lauren Stone, and I worked together on a 3-year strategic plan for middle school with the hope and goal of creating a true middle school model at our school, which I've been here for 5 years, and I came in right at the kind of mid-COVID. And my understanding is that St. J had a pretty good middle school model, but then COVID kind of derailed everything. So what has happened since that is, as far as the trajectory at this school, is that there was money set aside to double our UArts staffs so that the middle school here could have middle school specific UArts teachers. And that has allowed us a lot more flexibility in our scheduling. So with that all in mind, we thought it was the right time to look very closely at our middle school and try to figure out ways that we could become more true middle school model. So we developed this strategic plan of using the resources from MGI. And we identified using, the kind of framework that MGI offered. I can't remember the book, but you guys all know the book we had to read. It's escaping my head right now. But so we focused on culture and community. We focused on instruction, assessment, and curriculum. And then we focused on leadership areas. And so leadership and the other area. So what we did is we kind of created a year-by-year schedule of things where we could progress based on what we're already doing, or in some cases we weren't doing at all. And so I would say year one so far has been highs and lows. I think from my vantage point, I think things have been going pretty well. I don't know that the whole middle school would feel that way. But what we did in order to collect kind of a baseline was that we started with a staff survey that we did create at MGI, but then we rolled that out, I think, even before school year started, as during our in-service, that we had asked for time for administration to have our staff fill that out. And then there were several areas that we felt were areas of growth for us, such as mentorship within the school itself, with not only here in our building, but thinking of high schoolers in our community with St. J Academy, thinking of ways we could build more mentorship opportunities. I won't list all of the things that our faculty thought were areas of growth, but these are some of the main ones. PLP was a significant area of growth for us because we used to have a PLP coordinator who was fantastic, but as part of that we had created that position with COVID money, and when that COVID money went away, it didn't get put into the local budget, so we lost that person as the PLP coordinator. She's still in our building. She doesn't work in that capacity. So that has been a struggle to get teams on board with PLP in the robust way we had been when we had the coordinator. It's one of the reasons I'm taking a class with Dawn, so I can bring that learning back into this school. And then another area where people thought, I think, yeah, our middle school tends to feel pretty fragmented, and that there's not as much consistency between grade levels as far as expectations in middle school as we would like. So that's something that we need to work towards as well. And then areas of growth where we have a really wonderful, because of what I told you before about adding UArts teachers, we have an electives program for our 7th and 8th graders where they get to choose the electives that they want to attend. And our UArts teachers do an amazing job of creating really high interest classes, such as like landscape art. We have a engineering class. We have a cooking class. Just a lot of really cool opportunities for our kiddos. We also felt like positive feedback on MTSS and teacher goal setting. Those were all areas of strength that were identified and before we started. So we collected that data. Sharon, I'll let her back in here. She just got out of the meeting. We're kind of like musical chairs here.
Oh my God.
But so we used that data. We met again. We talked to our administrators and identified some next steps. And then we also, this was part of my action research with Dr. Nagel there, is that I gave a survey to students and let them tell us what they thought was going well. And the interesting thing for me was that I recognize that there are a lot of the same weaknesses across the board between what the staff were reporting and what students were reporting. So some of the areas like PLP and family engagement and engagement in general, interdisciplinary units, community partnerships, these are all things that our staff identified as areas of growth, and mentorship, like I said before, and our students also thought those were areas of growth. So there's a lot of alignment between amongst the data that is going to inform our decisions going forward. So, it's a mixed bag. We've made some progress, I think, especially, my lens is on 8th grade. I feel like 8th grade has made some good progress around some of these initiatives, but there's always room for growth. And, this school year seems long at the beginning, and then when you're in the midst of it, you're on a treadmill and it just goes by so fast, and you lose momentum on some of these initiatives. So, yeah.
Brenda?
What you said.
So Brenda, thank you so much. I want to go back to that in just a little bit here. I want to go back to that list you said of what teachers and students recognize, because I think I heard community partnerships. But could we hear also from Meredith and Jess and Nick and Sarah about what your project was that you laid out at MGI and what that is looking like at the moment? And I'll let you folks decide who's going to start.
Okay, so we have been working on a project to increase our sense of belonging in our middle school. And we've been doing that we have this Roots and Ripples program that we've implemented in TA and also in classes, where students are thinking about how their values and choices affect their impact on their community. So we have done stuff like we've made value flags where students have reflected on their values in TA, and students also do reflections on some summatives on their learning in school and how it might affect their choices that they make in life. And this all stemmed from trying to increase our sense of belonging in the middle school, according to some data that we had from last year. So we've also been collecting student data through Google Forms in the fall, and also we did one recently, and then we're going to do another one before the end of the year.
So we have sort of two groups within our MGI group from Harwood, the TA crew, and then the sort of like project crew based more on how we're going to actually demonstrate that this program is working. So in TA, which is the group that I'm a part of, Sarah and I implemented a student leadership group in TA, and that's sort of representatives that were elected from their TAs to represent all the middle school. And they've sort of adopted the role of creating and running our biweekly community meetings, which puts some ownership on them for coming up with the activities that students are doing and then rolling them out in front of the whole middle school. And we're sort of finding our footing with that particular group. We did just do a middle school Olympics at the time of the Winter Olympics. And TAs sort of competed against one another in friendly competitions. And that was all planned by our students. I'm going to see what else Nick and Aaron and Sarah want to add over there, but it feels like the ownership, I'll say what my understanding of middle school practice, or just reinforcing what I already knew, was that the more ownership kids have over what they're doing and how information is presented to their peers is really seeming to make a difference. TA was something that in our recent staff medic, teachers felt like TA was a success this year. So it feels like we're moving in the right direction and figuring it out. I'm going to pass it off to the other people.
So personally, I'm on the committee that focuses on how students synthesize their school experience. We call it the Synthegration Committee. And our particular focus is on how they reflect on the work that they've done in their classes and a portfolio. We focus on preparing for student-led conferences, and we spent a lot of time focusing on our capstone experience, which we've hit a lot of hurdles. We've decided to extend it into a 2-year experience, so we'll run it next year, but we're still in the process of planning it. And we integrate in all of those things our Roots and Ripples curriculum. So like when it comes down to reflect on all their work, their students are looking for connections between not only the classes and the work that they do, also the concepts that we've introduced with our Roots and Ripples curriculum, with values and identity and ethics and choices and community, just to make it, all encompassing.
And Nick just looked over at his wall to read those keywords to you. Those are our themes. And we've created a set of posters that have questions with them that we are using in our classes across the entire middle school, including the counselor's office, and the PE has been invited to hang these posters, and the language teachers have been invited to hang these posters. And I have them hung up in my room. And when I ask students to think about things like climate change, sustainability, and ethical decisions that scientists have to make, I'm able to point to the board, and we're starting to explicitly help the students connect what they're learning in school with these ideas, these themes of values, identity, ethics, choices, and community. And we're finding that it's really unnatural for them to go so abstract with something, for instance, like the periodic table. And if you as an adult think a little bit just about the diversity of the elements for 3 seconds, you can start to think, oh yeah, it's like humans are all diverse, and we all have something to offer, and we're all valuable regardless of how many, protons or electrons we have. And so helping them to make that leap has been a challenge I've found in the classroom. But we're also collecting data on student sense of belonging, and our first survey blew last year's data out of the water. So we had a really strong start with like a really clear focus straight out of MGI into the beginning of the school year with, and kudos to the TA team, which is not me, it's Sarah and Meredith and our colleague Jen. And the students clearly felt comfortable and safe in the building at that point. And then our current results dipped a little, no surprise, because it's March and we got the results right after break. But we're eager to see, after we continue to help them understand the connection between values and choices and impact, what their sense of belonging is going to look like by the end of the year and by the end of our project. And again, it won't be finished by the end of this school year. And I think a cool thing to share is that we plan on doing this every year as a 2-year thing, starting in 7th grade, and the capstone will be at the end of 8th grade.
All right, that's a great start. And I mean, that's awesome to hear the different things that are happening. Does anybody have a specific question for the St. Johnsbury or Harwood schools before we kind of get to the next topic?
I have a question. You both schools have mentioned the idea of student engagement. So my question is how are you measuring it or gathering information about it? And what do you think some of the underlying factors are that improves engagement if you're seeing it happen?
Funny you should ask. So I'm currently in an action research with Don in his class through St. Mike's. And that's one of the things that I'm tracking in Capstone is engagement. And so what I'm using as to help me with that is I had a survey at the very beginning. We rolled out Capstone at meaning that we brought the kids to their actual groups. We had rolled it out before February break, but they actually were assigned to their groups on Monday of this week. Yes, Monday. And so they were actually able to go into their groups, and that's the first thing they did was take their survey. So the survey tracked such things as interest level, whether they were excited, how well they felt confident in their topic, whether they, what type of scaffolds and supports they would need. And so, it's not perfect, but the cool thing I was telling Don this when I saw him at Family on Tuesday is that there's a new thing on Google Forms that if you put a question, like say, what is rate your engagement level on the Likert scale, there's actually like, you can have thumbs up, you can have stars, or you can have hearts. So I think it's just kind of like translates to middle school. So how many hearts out of 5 would you give, your interest level in your topic? And so I looked at my results and I saw most people were at 3. So it'll just be interesting to track that over time. And another thing I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks is polling maybe 3 to 5 kids and interviewing them and asking them about specific engagement. And of course, I will also be doing regular check-ins with students as I'm the mentor for the group of community projects, because we have 4 different strands, 4 different pathways, if you want to say, for a capstone. And my strand is community engagement or community outreach. So I'll regularly be checking in with them on their engagement and what their project looks like. But that's what I got so far.
Harwood?
I think we're finding it's really hard to measure engagement and belonging, which was kind of the whole reason that we wanted to create this project to begin with. I think the survey is one part of it. And the survey, we plan to give 3 times through the year, as Erin said, and it asks questions about if they feel like they have a trusted adult in the building. Do they have somebody that makes them feel safe in the building? Do they feel like they belong here? Do they, you know, I don't have it right in front of me.
Yeah,
so
they feel welcome.
Yeah, do they feel welcome in our building? And, you know, so we're hoping to see some movement there. But then I think the more like grassroots sort of effort that we fell off a little bit with our schedules, but we were doing like circles in TAs, and then that information would get brought back to the student leadership group, and then actual decisions or outcomes would happen based on what students were sharing with their TA. And so it feels like we're doing better this year of getting feedback from the students, and then actually using it to create the environment that they seem to need or want. And that does seem to be landing, I think. I don't really know how to measure it, more like anecdotally, I think that we can see it. I don't know if the other Harwood crew has anything to add.
We had, I think it's important to share that there was a whole student leadership 2 meetings where the students dug through the idea of belonging and broke it apart and talked about what we could ask to measure it. And that's what we based the survey off of. And so the students basically decided what belonging is, the student leadership group, which is what, 16, 15 kids?
Mhm.
It's a big group. So they decided what belonging actually is and what makes it. And so like Meredith was saying, it's things like safety and feel like you are supposed to be somewhere and you have a safe adult and you feel welcomed and that kind of thing. And so our survey was not only like you did, a Likert scale with the stars, it was also a short answer. And so that's where we got some things like teachers' names, which was cute, and like things like my friends and besties, and but also some actual legitimate answers that help us understand what the students are experiencing. Not that besties not legitimate.
Any other comments or follow up on that, on James's question? All right, I just want to be respectful of folks' time. So I think we're going to go to the last question there. And this is just as a practitioner, this is the one that's always sort of most interesting to me personally. I can't speak for everybody else, but how has the work that you've done with your capstone projects or with monitoring student engagement or with the TA, what are some realizations or changes in your teaching practice that have come about? And I realize that most of you are, you know, very experienced teachers, have done a lot of work with middle level students, but what's something that you're starting to realize or that's helping you in your day-to-day practice as a middle level practitioner? And this time we'll start with Harwood, and I'll let you folks have at it.
Meredith, are you going to go, or Jess? I'm going to start because something popped in my mind that has come up for a few years for me now, and that's just the notion that when you want to center something other than content, it has to come first. And my curriculum has been building to the concept of values, choices, and impact by getting students from concepts like mass and volume to climate change. And it's been something that is harder to incorporate on the daily with short cores and quick motion from one thing to another, and just like the boundaries of a school day. And the more we, you know, personally, the more I am aware that that is a goal of mine, and the more I make it a goal to put justice, equity, diversity and inclusion, as well as just humanity in the forefront, the more it happens. But it won't happen if I'm not really trying, because the content doesn't have that stuff, not necessarily science.
And I think it's really easy in a middle school to, just keep to yourself, and every student, they go from class to class and it just feels like you're traveling from island to island with no connection between them. And so if nothing else, the fact that we've been working together more so than probably previous years, and the fact that students see that, I think has helped develop that sense of community. We talk, that we talk about them, and we talk about what we're going to do with them. And the fact that they can see that and witness that is, I think, a huge part of sort of like the success of that belonging and community.
I think a piece for me that has shifted is like the intent of this student leadership group that we're working with, and that in the past I've had a student leadership group that like works on dances or has like specific projects like through Up for Learning, for example. But this one feels more rooted in the work that we did through MGI, and is really trying to get student input on more substantial things in our middle school, I guess. And so I feel like we sort of lost track for some years around student voice, but I feel very excited about bringing it back and trying to harness more of that leadership within our students.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. You go, finish.
I think just on Sarah's idea, I feel like a lot of middle schoolers sort of feel like, what I think doesn't even matter anyway, because adults are just going to like do whatever they want. So I don't even care about sharing my thoughts. And I think like it can be easy for them to fall into that sort of idea that teachers just make decisions and they don't get a voice. And we've heard that a lot with like some changes that were made. And I think like finding some authentic ways for students to feel empowered to go about things in the right way and in a way that really builds community and isn't just, like, I'm going to go talk to the principal about how I feel about this, instead of like just getting everybody involved and really bringing in a lot of voices and working together to build a culture that works for everybody. I think just feels better for all of us. So it's been good, and there's still a lot of work to do.
I'm sorry. I think a big difference, like I was new here last year and I used to teach high school before this. And so middle school is a little more new for me. But what I felt like last year was we were a little more reactionary to what was happening around us. And this year, with all the work that we put in and all the programs that we have going on around school, it's not like that anymore, right? We're building and reminding them about all of the social interactions that should be happening, and their leadership skills, and like that their voices are heard. And so it's all, I don't know the words escaping me. But yeah.
So I have several kind of like threads of thoughts that I don't know if I can weave together, but I'll try. One thing that is definitely I've had to sit with is that, change is hard. Systemic change is hard. And so when you have a 3-year, that's, we knew that we were going to MGI with an ambitious goal to have a 3-year strategic plan. And we knew that buy-in from staff was going to be one of the biggest hurdles, because we all know what it's like to be in the middle of a year and just feel like you can't do anything else. So I guess the takeaway from that is, for me, and we all know this, it's not like it's earth-shattering, but the more we can give to students to create and take on initiatives that they can spearhead, it's just so great all the way around. It's empowering for them. It helps us achieve what our goals are. And so the more I think about that, the more I try to figure out opportunities beyond just like obvious things like student council, which, I'm a student council advisor, and it's amazing what our kids can accomplish. But I'm trying to think of other ways, like for example, the Black History Month, the museum that we did was just something every year I try to do a Black History initiative in the school. And it's a lot of work because it's usually just me that's doing it by myself. And, it's exhausting. And so then I just started thinking of ways that I could get the kids to buy into it. And so we had student council that did the slides for grades 4 through 8th, and they, for morning meeting. And then my 8th graders, I thought, let's have them create a museum, a Black History museum, like a pop-up. And it just was so great because it for me professionally clicked off so many boxes. It's like kids were super engaged. They were really motivated to research their topic. I encouraged them to find topics that were relevant to them and their own interests. I encouraged them to make interactive exhibits like they would see at their own museum. So that was really fun for them. It ticked my box of like, I'm doing the social justice, the racial justice stuff that I want to do. I'm creating engagement between all grade levels. So, but really all that energy, most of it came from the students. So that's kind of my takeaway, is the more I can give transfer, my goals. I know this sounds like narcissistic. I don't mean it that way, but like in any way that I can empower students and get them to take on initiatives that I think they're interested in, that are also aligned with my goals, the better.
Thank you, everyone, for those reflections and that feedback. I think it sounds like everybody's just doing, dynamic and really important work. And I just want to voice my appreciation for seeing something through. I know that June of 2025 seems like a long, long time ago. And to be able to carry it through and to be able to reflect on the changes that are happening in your school is really impressive. And I appreciate that. I want to does anybody, Meg, James, Andrea, Kyle, do you have any questions or comments? Meg?
Yeah, something I just heard so loud and clear was the idea of teaching with intention, of just having, when we have clarity of what it is that we really seek out of our classrooms, and it stems from these ideas from the successful middle school of just empowerment, equity, engagement. It's transformative, right? Like, when we're curious about what are the kids' needs, what do we want out of this learning experience, it keeps us going, because there's a lot of reasons that push against that, like, drive, right? So when we find that for us and it keeps us engaged, it's exciting. So thank you for sharing all that work. It's inspiring for me to hear that, because it's like, yeah, let's go. So cool. Thank you.
And I mean, as a practitioner, seeing what you guys are doing is really motivating. And I hope you understand how powerful your examples are. It's just, I get motivated by seeing other people working really hard to make their practice and their learning communities better. And so I really appreciate that. I'm going to just close out with one quick question. And that question is, if, I work on MGI, I'm a practitioner, but if you're thinking about your practice right now, you're thinking about middle level students and communities, you're thinking about what's going on in the world, what would be like a recommendation that you might have, to focus on, maybe even these conversations next year, or maybe a strand at MGI? I heard Sarah talk about leadership. Maybe that's a recommendation. Do you have recommendations or topics or themes that you would recommend to people who are interested in professional development, interested in making middle level education better? And if so, what might that be? I'll give you a second to just ponder that, and then anybody who wants to start that up can do it. Let's just keep it brief. I want to honor your time, but it's valuable feedback for us. Brenda?
Yeah, for me, I would love a strand about responsible use of technology and AI in classrooms. both for our students and for our teachers. What does that look like? And especially, I'm just on a rampage about too much tech. And I just would love more education on it for myself. What does the research actually say?
There's something, I don't know, in my work that I've come across, and somebody, I don't remember who I quoted, but they said something about the cracks in the curriculum, and it might have been Gorski, but I feel like there could be something about what we do with the cracks in the curriculum and what we do in the space between, for instance, passing periods, or we have like a 15-minute homeroom where we have unstructured time with students. And I'm not saying in order to make those more planning, but if there was a strand with, I've found them to be very valuable for building relationships and building a sense of community with students that doesn't form in a regular class, and that doesn't form when I am like, driving the bus. But when they have the ability to, write on my chalkboard in the back of the room, or like decorate something, or play with a ball, and they get creative about how they play with the ball, but they're playing with the ball every single day. And it just becomes like a part of what we do in that space and time. And that has, like I said, proven to really support some of the relationships that help support that sense of belonging, I think, and also the sense of course, it slipped. It's been a very long week. Oh, I don't know. Sorry. Also, yeah, the space between.
Anybody else?
I would say one thing that the Harwood crew over here has been, in addition to belonging, really trying to tackle the idea of accountability and ownership. And that's really hard because the grades just don't quite do it enough. So if students don't have the external motivation, maybe from home, or the intrinsic motivation just to do well or learn on their own, we find it can be really hard. So we did just implement like a whole new accountability measure that is starting this week, and we're going to see how it plays out. Not related to roots and ripples, but I would say accountability and ownership is something that we're really trying to figure out over here in Duxbury.
One of the Yay. Please share if you come up to anything like groundbreaking, because we're struggling with that in St. Johnsbury as well.
I'm sure that you are. Well, we have our ARC plan that we just rolled out. Well, when we see how it goes, we'll let you know. We're going to try it. It's a pilot. So
speaking of technology and the emoticons, Nick Gordon starting us off, and little floating hearts. Nice. Again, I just want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's really important for us, I think, to hear how it's going, and the work you're doing is just really, really impressive. Does anybody else have any comments or feedback before we end?
I was just going to share that at our family conference last week, we said this at the beginning, but we collected so much feedback from students around what do they want in their schools, what are they looking for, and actually accountability came up from them too. So I think there's, I don't think we'd have to press hard to get their voice in on what that looks like and what that feels like. But Kyle and the family board will be putting that together to share with folks. Hey, here's what the kids are saying. Here's something that they're looking for. So stay tuned.
All right.
One thing that's popping into my mind, Dawn, just as like a final like synthesis kind of thought, since I've been processing a lot from what everybody's sharing is that so much of what I'm hearing from folks around, how do we get kids engaged? How do we keep them motivated? What do we do with this AI thing that seems to be taking over the world, right? And all this kind of stuff. And if we go back to those like best middle grades practices, a lot of the things that I'm hearing being used as the way to sort of sell AI to educators. I'm trying to think of how to say this the right way, much like you, Brenda, but like it's the same thing we could be doing with students. We could be, empowering students to do some of the work that what we're running through an AI system. And it would be way more meaningful to them because it would come authentically from their voices. When it comes to designing the assessment at the end of a unit, yeah, you can run it through AI, but you could also just engage kids in that conversation and say, what would be a meaningful way for you to show me that you've been able to, grow in this particular area with these skills that we've been focusing on. So it's just, I get a lot of things going on in my mind about like, how can we sort of take this moment of tech and AI and all this stuff that is trying to like pull us away from that space that we were in, where we were really empowering students and student-centered education. How can we pull back in that direction and say, yeah, those same things that we're trying to get out of this tech could actually come from human beings, right? That we're working with on a daily basis. So that's my brain floating around this afternoon.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been very valuable to me as a practitioner and as someone who works with middle level students. I really appreciate your taking the time to join us, and I think your feedback has been invaluable. Thank you for all that you do. I hope you make it through March. March can seem like a long month, and there we go again. And I just hope you have a fantastic end to your work week, a good weekend. And thanks again. Hopefully we'll run into all of you in the near future.